Hello and welcome from the Financial Services Center in the Office of Student Affairs at the University of Pennsylvania. Today, I'll be covering payments to individuals outside of Penn, in other words, people who are not faculty, staff, or students at Penn. As always, if anything I discuss is unclear, your financial coordinator is available to help answer questions, and you can find their contact info on our website. To start, I'm going to take a moment to emphasize that it's crucial that you contact your financial coordinator as soon as possible for these payments. The payment processes I'm going to go over are involved and they take time, and it's very important that we follow them in order to stay in compliance with state, local, and federal law. In many cases, the paperwork for these processes requires approval from other offices at Penn before the services are provided by the individual, and that takes time. So please get in touch with your financial coordinator as soon as possible once you know that you're bringing someone from outside Penn to provide a service. One more thing before I get into these processes. We need to define the terms honorarium and fee. These two words are often used interchangeably in the context of paying someone coming to a university, but they actually refer to two different situations. Knowing which term applies will determine which payment process you'll need to use. So an honorarium is a gift of money to someone providing an unpaid service. Honorarium payments are offered as a token of appreciation for participation in an activity or event, and they are not a contractual obligation to pay for services rendered. An example of an honorarium would be if you ask someone from outside the university to come and talk to your group and they agreed with no mention of a cost or a fee for the service. Your group might decide to pay them an honorarium of your choosing as a way to thank them for their time. So a fee is a payment made to an individual, usually a professional, in exchange for services rendered. It can be stated in a contract or not. Here's a side note about contracts. Students are not authorized to sign contracts, so if you do get one, be sure to send it to your financial coordinator right away. Your financial coordinator is actually not even authorized to sign contracts. We have to send them to another department for review. Often, the contract itself will provide specifics that will actually help us determine the correct payment process. So if there was any kind of a negotiation or contract or statement or discussion of a payment amount for these services, that is automatically considered a fee. One note of warning, I've actually seen many contracts from agencies where they call the fee an honorarium just because the individual is coming to a university. Don't be fooled. This is a fee, not an honorarium. Okay, so hopefully we have some clarity now around honorarium versus fee. Again, if you're ever not sure, just ask your financial coordinator to help with your specific situation. Moving on, we'll go over the 4 different types of payments to individuals. First, I'll talk about what we need to process an honorarium payment. As I just mentioned, this is a gift given to someone providing an unpaid service. The paperwork we need for this is the payment request form. And if you're not familiar with that form, we do have a video on how to complete this form as well. So we need that payment request form along with documentation of the event, like a graphic or a flyer or a copy of an email blast. The next payment type we'll discuss is a fee. So there are actually 2 different processes that are used in different situations. There can be some gray area here, so feel free to reach out to your financial coordinator to discuss the situation before you start the paperwork, just to make sure you're on the right track. So the 2 types of payment processes for paying a fee are limited engagement and independent contractor. We'll start with limited engagement. A limited engagement fee is a payment to an individual outside the university for providing a service of an academic nature, a short duration, meaning a single visit, or it would be something that happens just a couple times over the course of a year, and or a low dollar amount. So $1,000 or less per transaction, up to $5,000 max in a calendar year. This is intended for guest speakers, guest lecturers, artists, performers, writers, editors, board members, critics, preceptors, mentors, and or anyone else who meets these fee guidelines. Some examples of limited engagement payments would be a DJ for an end-of-semester social event, or a speaker coming to campus to give a talk to your club, or a music teacher coming in for a special one-time masterclass. The key is that this should be a payment for a service that happens once or infrequently at most, and the payment amount is less than $1,000. Note that if they do provide the service more than once, each time they come requires a new limited engagement. Okay, the forms we need for this are the payment request form and the limited engagement form. Now, there are 3 different types of the limited engagement form depending on the individual situation. So there's one for a U.S. person, there's also one for a non-resident of the U.S., and another one for global services being provided outside the U.S. So please have the individual complete the appropriate limited engagement form and return it to your financial coordinator along with the payment request form as soon as possible. This limited engagement form needs to be reviewed and signed by someone else at Penn before the service takes place. That's outside our department, which goes back to what I said at the beginning. Providing as much advance notice as possible is really important. Okay, so the other type of fee payment is an independent contractor. An independent contractor is an individual who does business with the university as a supplier of services. Independent contractors typically are not supervised. They have control over their work schedule. They have a set of skills not found elsewhere within the university, and they provide the same or similar services to the general public as part of a continuing trade or business. We use this classification for payments to individuals over $1,000 and or for services provided over multiple sessions. For example, an instructor from outside the university who comes to teach a dance class every week over the course of a whole semester is paid as an independent contractor. It's important to note that each project undertaken by the independent contractor requires its own form. So in the previous example, let's say that the instructor completed the paperwork and taught in the fall semester. If the group brings the same person back to teach again in the spring, they need to do the paperwork again for that new set of spring dance lessons. The forms we need for the independent contractor process are the payment request form and the service provider questionnaire. Please have the instructor fill out the service provider questionnaire and send it to your financial coordinator along with the payment request form that you complete. Your financial coordinator then fills out their own accompanying form and sends both off to HR for review. If approved, we can proceed with the payment. The entire review process with HR needs to happen before the individual begins providing services. So, once again, it is crucial that we get that service provider questionnaire back from the instructor along with your payment request form well in advance. Okay, so that's independent contractor process. We're now moving on to the 4th and final type of payment to individuals outside the university, which is a guest travel reimbursement. This is the process we use to reimburse anyone who isn't affiliated with Penn for their travel expenses, as long as they are not being paid a fee. We can use this for a standalone expense reimbursement. For example, you're bringing a guest in for an event and you're not paying them, but you are covering their travel costs. This process can also be used in combination with an honorarium payment. So a guest being paid an honorarium can also have their travel expenses reimbursed through this process. The guest travel reimbursement cannot be used when the individual is being paid a fee, so it's not used when we're paying someone with a limited engagement or as an independent contractor. In those cases, the travel expenses get added on to the fee and paid through the same limited engagement or independent contractor process. It also cannot be used by Penn faculty, staff, or students. These expenses get reimbursed through the web platform Concur. So please refer to our Concur video for help with those reimbursements. The forms we need for a guest travel reimbursement are the payment request form, the guest travel reimbursement worksheet, and we will also need copies of the receipts for the expenses being reimbursed. So scanned or photographed is fine. So we've covered the 4 different payment processes that apply to individuals outside the university. the last thing I want to mention before I let you go is that in addition to the forms, anyone who has not been paid by Penn before will need to be onboarded into our system in order to be paid. So this is done through an online form that the individual needs to complete. The person will confirm their contact information. They will select a payment method, check or direct deposit, and they will also upload their own tax documents like the W-9. You'll notice that the W-9 is not among the forms I listed before as something that we need to process payment. It's much more secure for the individual to upload this themselves during onboarding rather than having it change hands from them to you to me. So please don't collect their tax information or W-9. Finally, this onboarding process is another one that takes place outside our office, and it can take time for the other folks to review everything. So this goes back to my first point about providing as much advance notice as possible. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching, and please don't hesitate to contact your financial coordinator with any questions.